Have you ever walked into a room and instantly regretted it? I did the moment I stepped into the grand ballroom of the Evergreen Resort. Chandeliers dripped crystal light across the marble floors, and everything about the place whispered wealth, respect, and high society. There I was, in the middle of all of it, a stranger to my own family. Once the daughter they left behind, now the woman they'd never see coming. Adam's hand found the small of my back, steadying me with the gentle pressure of his palm. "Breathe," he whispered, his surgeon's eyes assessing me with clinical precision. He knew how hard this moment was for me, even if he couldn't fully understand it. But he was right about one thing. We had earned our place here. Jake, our 6-year-old son, tugged at his bow tie. "Mom, this thing's choking me." His impatience was already wearing thin, and I couldn't help but smile. "Just for a little while, buddy. Remember our deal. Behavior now. Swimming pool after the reception." He gave me a reluctant nod, and I adjusted his bow tie. It was a minor thing, but in this world, appearances mattered. I wasn't about to let anything distract from the reason I was there, because this moment, right now, was mine to own. Then, just as I was beginning to feel like I might belong, a wave of familiarity struck. My heart stopped for a beat. Across the room, in the center of it all, I saw her. The slight tilt of her head, the way she leaned forward when she laughed. The familiar gestures of someone I hadn't seen in 11 years. My sister, Sarah. She was the bride now, a vision in white, champagne glass raised in a toast. And then our eyes locked. For a moment, time stood still. My hand trembled slightly as I held my champagne flute, but it was the only outward sign of the earthquake happening inside me. I hadn't recognized the name Daniel Brooks on the invitation. I hadn't made the connection. I assumed Sarah was still using our family name, Collins. But now, standing here, watching her smile, no, the smile wasn't hers anymore. It was a performance, a carefully crafted mask, and the fact that she hadn't reached out to me in years, not even a word after all this time, hit me harder than I expected. It wasn't about the wedding, not anymore. It was about everything that had happened before. I hadn't even recognized her at first. It was the tilt of her head that did it, the way she leaned forward when she laughed, those tiny things that only someone who knew her as a child could pick out in an instant. "Brooklyn." Her voice sliced through the ambient chatter of the room. I flinched. There was no disguising the shock, the discomfort she felt seeing me here. My parents were standing behind her, the familiar weight of their presence a silent barrier between us. I saw my father move protectively toward Sarah, his broad shoulders blocking me from view like he had done so many times in the past. Always the protector, always the one to shield Sarah from anything that could make her feel less than perfect. "What are you doing here?" My mother's voice was too loud, too sharp. She didn't even try to hide her disdain. "You shouldn't be here." A rush of memories hit me like a freight train, the sound of that same voice telling me I wasn't good enough, telling me to get out, to leave, to go back to the streets where I belonged because I wasn't a Collins anymore. For the briefest moment, I felt that old familiar shame creep up my throat. The memories of being 21, standing in the rain with nothing but a suitcase and my broken heart, flooded back. I didn't belong. I didn't fit. But I was here now. Adam stepped forward, his voice firm but measured. "My wife is a guest. She's the CEO of Medova." We were personally invited by the groom. The name Medova seemed to ripple through the crowd of doctors, nurses, and medical professionals. I saw a woman in a burgundy dress turn to her companion and whisper, "That's Amber Collins, the one who developed the patient monitoring system." I smiled inwardly. The girl they once told was nothing, was no one, was standing here now, in this place. But I didn't speak yet. Instead, I kept my composure, stayed in the moment. "Hello, Sarah. Congratulations." The words were simple, but they felt like a thunderclap in the quiet tension of the room. She flinched as though I had shouted. I didn't shout. I just said what needed to be said. Adam's hand returned to the small of my back. His silent question, stay or go. I wasn't about to leave. Not now. Not when I finally had something to hold on to, something real. Is that lady in the white dress your sister? Jake's innocent question cut through the heavy silence like the gentle tug of a thread unraveling a tapestry. Does she go to Stanford like you did? My heart tightened, and I saw the panic rise in Sarah's face. The words were out of her mouth before she could stop them. Yes, she did. But I heard the tremor, the hesitation, and I saw the way her eyes darted to the side, avoiding my gaze. Her husband Daniel stepped in, looking between us both with growing confusion. You know the CEO of Medova? His voice was steady, but his gaze darted back and forth between Sarah and me. I thought you said your sister was... His voice trailed off, the unfinished sentence hanging between us like a cliffhanger, one I was too tired to resolve. Instead, I took a breath and met his gaze, not backing down. There was no need for a scene. I graduated summa cum laude, I said, keeping it simple, while working 3 jobs. Daniel looked between Sarah and me, his expression shifting as he tried to piece it all together. I saw him realize the disconnect, the lie, the truth. But I wasn't here to destroy anyone. I wasn't here to expose my family. I had no interest in that. All I wanted was to make it through this moment without losing myself again. The rest of the evening passed in a blur. Sarah fumbled through conversations with her new husband, trying to make sense of the cracks in her perfect life. I let the whispers fade into the background. My presence wasn't the real disruption, her lies were. And just as the night was winding down, Adam's hand found mine again, a silent anchor. We had earned our place here, and now it was time to leave. I wondered that, standing there in the middle of the room, while everything around me spun like some dream. My family's lies had kept me away for over a decade, but the truth had its way of cutting through the most carefully constructed facades. It was just a matter of time before the weight of it all came crashing down, and tonight it was happening. As the night wore on, I noticed people whispering. Glances shifted between me and Sarah, though they did their best to mask it behind polite smiles and strained conversations. The medical professionals who'd recognized Medova's name, my name, weren't shy about it. I overheard snippets of conversation about the revolutionary patient monitoring system I had developed. My work was being recognized by some of the most respected figures in the field. It should have felt good, a reminder of how far I'd come, but the reality of this situation, this wedding, felt like a punch to the gut. Sarah's carefully curated image was starting to fray. I watched her as she spoke to guests, her rehearsed words faltering, her laughter too high-pitched. She was doing everything she could to keep the narrative together, but I could see the cracks. The longer we stayed, the more visible they became. A woman, probably in her 50s, approached me. She wore an elegant pantsuit and a name badge that read Medova. Her eyes widened as she recognized me. Amber Collins, right? She asked, her voice full of admiration. Your presentation at last month's medical summit was brilliant. Your system's making a real impact on post-surgical care. Hospitals across 4 states are implementing it now. I smiled, modestly acknowledging her praise. Thank you. It's been a lot of work, but it's rewarding. The conversation shifted, and I noticed that across the room, Sarah was engaged in a discussion with a few doctors. One of them, a cardiologist, seemed puzzled as he questioned her. I thought Stanford had moved away from that approach a few years ago. You were there, though, weren't you? Stanford's medical program doesn't exactly offer remote degrees. Sarah's smile wavered. She laughed too quickly, the pitch of it not matching her usual confident tone. Well, you know how academic debates go. Some professors hold on to traditional methods longer than others. The way her words came out was forced, rehearsed, and it was obvious to anyone who was paying attention that it didn't add up, not to me, and not to Daniel. Daniel, standing nearby, shifted his gaze from Sarah to me. His brow furrowed in confusion, and then I saw it. His body language tightened. He was no longer fully invested in the conversation with his new wife. The pieces were beginning to click into place. His suspicion was written all over his face. I watched it happen. The walls Sarah had built, brick by brick, were starting to crumble, and she could feel it. The whispers, the glances. I wasn't the only one who saw the truth. Others did too. Before I could process it all, I felt a presence at my side. My father. His voice, still commanding, broke through the hum of conversation. "You need to leave," he said, his words terse, his tone leaving no room for argument. "You're ruining Sarah's wedding." For a moment, I thought of all the years of rejection, of being told I wasn't good enough, how I'd been forced out of my own family, told that I wasn't worthy of their time or their money. My college fund had been funneled into Sarah's education while I was left to fend for myself. That memory, standing in the rain with nothing but a suitcase, was too familiar. It was always the same. My family couldn't accept that I'd made something of myself without them. But I wasn't that girl anymore. I wasn't the one who was left behind. I stood my ground, lifting my chin slightly, and in a calm but firm voice, I replied, "I was invited by Daniel. I'm a guest here." My father's face went red, his lips pulling back in a sneer. "Don't play innocent with me," he spat. "Medova? Your so-called company? This is a wedding, not some networking event." Adam stepped forward then, his voice cutting through the tension. "Medova is a reputable company," he said, his surgeon's calm taking over the moment. "Brooklyn was the keynote speaker at last month's summit in Boston. Her work is being implemented across multiple hospitals. Perhaps you should focus on that instead of making baseless accusations." I could feel the shift in the room. The guests, those in the medical field who had quietly listened to the conversation, were now murmuring among themselves. They were concluding whether they wanted to or not. The recognition was undeniable, and I could see it in their eyes. Brooklyn Collins was no longer the girl they'd written off. My mother, who had remained silent until then, was now visibly flustered. Her hands fluttered as she tried to redirect attention to Sarah. "Look at my daughter," she said in a high-pitched tone. "She's always been driven, but she had certain advantages we couldn't provide her with. Of course, she had to make it on her own." The words stung. The advantages she spoke of weren't advantages at all. They were lies. I had worked harder than anyone to get where I was. There was no trust fund, no safety net, only the drive to survive. I turned away from them then, my focus shifting to Adam and Jake. Jake tugged at my sleeve. "Mom, can I have some cake now?" I smiled down at him. "Sure, buddy. Let's go find some cake." But as we walked away, I noticed Daniel watching us, his expression a mixture of confusion and something else. I wasn't sure what it was, doubt maybe. But I knew one thing. The facade that had held my family together was starting to crack, and I wasn't going to stick around to watch it crumble. Not anymore. As Adam took my hand, I felt a strange sense of peace settle over me. I wasn't here to burn bridges. I wasn't here to expose anyone. I had learned long ago that my family wasn't who I needed. I had built a life on my terms, and that life was enough. For the first time in years, I felt like I could walk away from this place without looking back. That was the air around me as the night wore on. The tension was almost palpable, hanging between the guests like a thick fog. Everyone had been given their roles. Sarah, the perfect bride; Daniel, the proud new husband; my parents, the pillars of respectability. And me? I was the disruptor, the ghost from the past who had suddenly returned to shake up everything they'd worked so hard to build. I could feel their eyes on me, even when they tried not to stare. The whispers had grown louder, and the glances exchanged behind my back were becoming harder to ignore. I had never thought of myself as a villain, but tonight, that's how I felt. It was as if I were the living embodiment of all the things Sarah and my parents had hidden for so long, the truths they'd buried to keep up their picture-perfect image. Adam could feel it too. He'd always had this way of sensing when things were off, and tonight was no exception. He leaned in close, his voice low. "You don't have to stay. We could leave." I shook my head, a soft smile playing at the corner of my lips. "Not yet. We've come this far. I'll stay until the end, for Jake." Jake was busy playing with his new toy car, oblivious to the emotional storm swirling around us. His innocence grounded me, reminded me that there was so much more to life than this family drama. I would take this moment, hold on to it, and move forward, no matter what happened here. And then it happened. I caught Sarah's eye across the room. The look she gave me, full of confusion, desperation, and something darker, was enough to make my chest tighten. The truth was catching up to her, and she knew it. The perfectly curated life she'd spent years constructing was beginning to crack in front of everyone. She was no longer the poised, polished woman I remembered. She was unraveling piece by piece. I could see it in the way she fumbled through conversations, trying to explain away the discrepancies in her story. Every time someone mentioned Stanford or her family's clinic, she shifted uncomfortably. Her usual confidence was nowhere to be found. Daniel was standing next to her, but his attention wasn't fully on her anymore. His eyes kept drifting back to me, and it was clear from the subtle tension in his shoulders that he was starting to connect the dots. He knew something wasn't adding up. At one point, Sarah caught him looking at me and seemed to panic. She quickly slid her arm through his, pulling him closer, trying to anchor him to her in a way that made it clear this wasn't just about the wedding. It was about keeping her own carefully constructed world intact. But there was nothing left to hold on to. The cracks were too wide, too obvious. "Do you need something?" I asked, stepping closer to them, trying to break the ice. My voice was calm, composed, even though my insides were anything but. I wasn't here to make a scene. That was their game, not mine. Sarah smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Oh, Brooklyn," she said, her voice sounding more like a whisper than anything genuine. "It's been so long. I didn't think I'd see you here." There was an edge to her words, a thinly veiled accusation hidden beneath the surface of her polite tone. I nodded, forcing myself to stay neutral. "I wasn't going to miss your big day, Sarah, but I'm glad to see you found someone. Daniel seems nice." Her smile faltered for a moment. I saw it. Just a flicker of doubt that crossed her face. But she recovered quickly. "Yes, he's perfect." There was an uncomfortable pause. Neither of us said anything for a few seconds. The room seemed to shrink around us, the silence heavy and thick. I took a deep breath and chose not to push further. The truth was there for anyone who cared to see it. I wasn't going to force it out of her. Instead, I turned my attention to Adam, who was watching me with a mixture of concern and support. He had been standing nearby, pretending to enjoy the event, but I could tell it wasn't easy for him either. This wasn't the wedding he had imagined, and it certainly wasn't the one I had pictured when I first received the invitation. Just as I was about to walk away and let things settle down, a familiar voice called out to me. "Brooklyn." I turned to see Daniel walking toward me. There was an unreadable expression on his face, but the curiosity in his eyes was impossible to miss. "Can we talk?" he asked quietly, not wanting to draw too much attention. I hesitated for only a moment before nodding. "Of course." We moved to the quieter side of the ballroom, away from the prying eyes of the guests. Daniel was no longer the proud, confident new husband he had been when we first met. His face was drawn, his posture stiff with uncertainty. "I didn't know," he began, his voice low. "About you, I mean. I didn't know you were her sister, and I didn't know any of this." I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. "What did you think? That we were the perfect family? That Sarah and I were always the perfect daughters?" My words were sharper than I intended, but I didn't care. This wasn't about me and him. It was about the truth that needed to be said. Daniel swallowed hard. "I don't know what I thought. I just know that everything she told me about you was—" He trailed off as though trying to find the right words. "I was told you dropped out of college, that you couldn't handle the pressure, that you disappeared." I felt a surge of anger, but I kept it in check. Disappeared? No, I was forced out, and I didn't drop out of college. I put myself through night classes. I worked 3 jobs. I graduated, summa cum laude, while Sarah was living the life I never had. The life I was never given the chance to have. Daniel looked stunned, his eyes wide. "But why didn't you tell me?" I shrugged, forcing myself to breathe evenly. "Why? So you could judge me too? So you could pity me the way they did?" "No, Daniel. I wasn't about to let anyone define who I was. I made my way, and it's been good for me. Better than I ever could have imagined." We stood in silence for a moment. Daniel's expression was a mixture of disbelief and something else. Regret, maybe. But I didn't care. What was done was done. There was no fixing it. Not now. Sarah's been lying about everything, he finally said, his voice heavy with realization. Her whole story was a fabrication. The clinic, Stanford, everything. I thought she was perfect, but she's been hiding the truth. I nodded, my heart heavy but resolute. I'm not surprised. That's been the way of things for years. But it's not my job to fix her mistakes, Daniel. I've built my life. It's time for you to build yours. That's how it felt, leaving the wedding. The weight of the evening, the tension, the unspoken truths, all of it hung in the air, thick and suffocating. But I didn't want to feel that weight anymore. I was done. I had done what I came here to do, and now it was time to leave. As I turned away from Daniel, I saw Adam standing by the exit, Jake beside him, tugging on his sleeve with that eager look of a child ready to move on to the next thing. I could see the concern on Adam's face, his brow furrowed, his lips tight, but there was something else there too. Understanding. He knew that for me, this was never about the wedding or the celebration. It was about finally reclaiming a part of myself that had been buried for too long. I walked toward them, my heels clicking sharply on the marble floor, the sound echoing through the ballroom. For a moment, I felt like I was walking in slow motion, the weight of the night lifting with each step. The whispers followed me, but they no longer touched me. Jake looked up at me, his eyes wide. "Are we going now, Mom?" I smiled at him, the warmth of his innocence pulling me back to reality. "Yes, sweetheart, we're going now." I could feel my parents' eyes on me as I passed, their stares laden with years of judgment and regret. They didn't say anything. They didn't need to. The years of silence between us spoke volumes. The door to the ballroom opened in front of me, and I stepped out into the cool night air. It felt like freedom, like stepping out of the shadow of everything I had left behind. And yet, in the distance, I could still hear the soft murmur of voices from the wedding, a reminder that some things were better left behind. Adam followed me into the parking lot, his hand slipping into mine. It was familiar, comforting, the steady warmth of his touch grounding me as we walked toward the car. He didn't ask how I was feeling, didn't try to pry. He knew me too well. We didn't need to talk about the evening. We had already said everything that mattered in the quiet moments before we left. When we reached the car, Jake jumped into the back seat, his excitement bubbling over. "Are we going to the pool now, Mom?" I couldn't help but laugh, the sound light and free. "Yes, buddy. We're going to the pool. But first, we're going to grab some ice cream." Adam slid into the driver's seat, glancing over at me as he started the car. "You okay?" he asked, his voice low. I nodded, taking a deep breath. "I'm better than okay. I needed to leave. And now I'm free." The car hummed as we drove away from the wedding, away from the ghosts of my past. We passed the sprawling, opulent resort in silence, the lights fading in the rearview mirror. There was no looking back. I had closed the door on that chapter of my life. No dramatic exit, no need for a tearful goodbye. I didn't need their approval. I had built my own life, and that was enough. When we arrived at the hotel, the night had settled into a soft quiet. The pool was empty, except for a few late-night swimmers, and the air smelled like chlorine and the warmth of summer. Jake wasted no time before he was in the water, his laughter echoing across the pool as he splashed around. Adam and I sat at the edge of the pool, our feet dangling in the water, watching our son enjoy the simple joy of being a child. It was a stark contrast to the chaos of the evening, the wedding, the lies, the unraveling of everything Sarah had worked so hard to maintain. But it was exactly what I needed. No drama, no games, just peace. "You know, I think we did the right thing," Adam said after a while, his voice thoughtful. "I know it wasn't easy for you to go back, but I can see it was a moment of closure." I glanced at him, a small smile tugging at my lips. It was, for me at least, but I didn't do it for them. I did it for me, to remind myself that I'm not who they thought I was. I'm not the girl they left behind. He reached over and took my hand, his fingers warm against my skin. "And you're not. You're not anyone's afterthought. You're building something, Brooklyn. Something real. I squeezed his hand, the words he said echoing in my mind. Yes, I had built something real, and I wasn't going to let anyone take that from me. We sat in silence for a while longer, the soft sounds of the pool water lapping against the edges, the only noise. I looked out at the dark sky, at the stars twinkling above, and realized that I was okay. I had made my way in the world. I didn't need to prove anything to anyone, and I had everything I needed right here with me. Jake's voice broke the quiet, full of excitement. "Mom, come play!" I laughed and stood up, holding out my hand to Adam. "Come on, let's join him. There's nothing left for us to do but enjoy our time together." We walked to the poolside, and for the first time that night, I felt light, unburdened, like the weight of all the lies and resentment had melted away in the warmth of the water. As we splashed around with Jake, I realized that it wasn't the lies that mattered anymore. It was the life I had created, one of honesty, of hard work, and love. My family might never understand me. They might never accept who I had become. But that didn't matter. I was free, and that freedom was the only thing I would ever need. The whispers, the lies, the years of abandonment, they no longer had power over me. And as I settled back into the rhythm of my life with Adam and Jake, I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't going to let my past define me. Not anymore. The days that followed the wedding were filled with a strange peace. I had thought I'd feel some sort of residual tension or perhaps regret, but there was nothing. Just the quiet contentment of knowing I had made the right choice, of knowing I had taken control of my destiny. I threw myself back into work, into the projects that fueled Modova's growth. Our patient monitoring systems were being implemented in new hospitals every month. We were making a difference. And that mattered far more than anything my family could ever take credit for. But even as my professional life flourished, there was still a nagging feeling I couldn't shake. Sarah. She had tried to contact me several times in the days after the wedding, her messages growing more frantic with each attempt. The first voicemail had been a half-hearted plea for money, something I had long grown used to from her. The second one threatened to tell Jake the truth about his mother, whatever that meant. And the third one? I didn't even listen. I deleted it without a second thought. There was no point in listening to her anymore. She had made her choices, and so had I. Yet, as the days turned into weeks, I couldn't ignore the quiet, nagging voice in my head that wondered if I should reach out to her. It wasn't about forgiveness, not really. It was about understanding, I suppose. Understanding why she had made those choices, why she had built a life based on lies, and if she was ready to come clean about it. I didn't know if I was ready for that kind of conversation, but I also couldn't pretend that it didn't weigh on me. One afternoon, as I sat at my desk in the Modova offices, the phone rang. I glanced at the caller ID before answering. It was Daniel. I hadn't spoken to him since the wedding, but I could feel the weight of his call before I even picked up the receiver. "Hello?" "Brooklyn." His voice was steady but tinged with something I couldn't quite place. "I know we didn't leave things on the best note. I didn't know what I was walking into that night. And I owe you an apology. For everything." I wasn't sure what I expected him to say, but it wasn't this. His words hung in the air, genuine but hesitant, as if he was still processing the information he'd learned that night. "You don't owe me anything," I replied, my voice calm. "You were just as much a victim of their lies as I was. If anyone owes anyone, it's Sarah. But that's not my problem anymore. I've moved on." There was a pause, a slight hesitation before Daniel spoke again. I don't know how to deal with all of this. Sarah has been lying to me for years, the whole time we've been together, and now it feels like everything is falling apart. I don't know where to go from here. I felt a pang of something, sympathy maybe, for the man who had married my sister, believing in a story that wasn't real, but I didn't let it distract me. I had my own life to live, my own choices to make. You need to figure that out, Daniel. I can't help you with that. What I can tell you is this. Don't waste any more of your time on Sarah's lies. They'll only drag you down. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. Finally, Daniel sighed. "You're right. I think... I think I'm done. With her. And with all of this." "You'll be fine," I said quietly, more to myself than to him. "You just have to start over. We all do." The conversation ended shortly after that, and I set the phone down, feeling a sense of finality settle in. Daniel wasn't my concern anymore. And neither was Sarah. My life was different now. I had a family to take care of, a business to run, and a future that was mine to shape. It wasn't going to be defined by the people who had walked away from me or the lies they'd told. But then, just when I thought I could let go of it all, Sarah reached out again. This time, it wasn't a voicemail or a text message. It was a letter, a real letter, sent to my office, written by hand, and marked with her name. I stared at it for a long time before opening it. When I finally did, the words she wrote seemed like a desperate attempt to find redemption. She apologized for everything, said she was wrong to believe the lies our parents had fed her. She admitted that I had always been the smart one, the driven one, the one who deserved so much more than what they had given me. She even said she was sorry for trying to keep me away from Jake, for letting them turn me into the villain in her story. As I read her words, I felt a mixture of emotions, resentment, anger, and even a small flicker of sympathy. But there was no forgiveness in me, not yet. Maybe not ever. Instead of replying immediately, I sat with it for a few days, letting the words settle in my mind. I didn't want to decide out of impulse. I had worked too hard to let emotions dictate my choices. When I finally did write back, it wasn't what she might have expected. I thanked her for her honesty. I told her that the past was behind me, and that while I didn't hold grudges, I also wasn't interested in rekindling a relationship with her. She had made her choices, and I had made mine. And for the sake of my peace, I would be moving forward without her. It wasn't an easy decision, but it was the right one. I never thought I would get to that point with my family. But the more I reflected on the past few months, the more I understood that my journey was no longer about them, no longer about their lies or their inability to see who I was. It was about me. It was about creating a life that I could be proud of, with people who truly supported me and valued what I had to offer. And most importantly, it was about the future I was building with Adam and Jake, a future where I no longer needed to look over my shoulder. The letter from Sarah had lingered on my desk for a few days. I'd thought about it constantly, wondering if I should reach out, if there was anything left to say. But I knew deep down that my answer had already been made. The past couldn't be rewritten, and it shouldn't be. I had spent so many years trying to escape it, trying to distance myself from the toxic narrative they had created around me. And now I was free. As I stood by the window of my office overlooking the city below, I felt a sense of peace. The phone buzzed on my desk, snapping me from my thoughts. I glanced at the screen. Adam's name lit up the caller ID. I picked up, a small smile tugging at my lips. "Hey," I said, my voice steady, content. "Hey," Adam's voice was warm. "How's the day going?" "Good," I replied. "Busy, but good. We're seeing more and more hospitals implement our systems. Modova's growing faster than I could have imagined." "That's great, Brooklyn. I'm proud of you," he said, his voice filled with admiration. "I just wanted to let you know Leo's ready for his soccer practice, and I think he's about to start begging me for ice cream again." I chuckled, the image of our son full of energy and excitement a reminder of everything that mattered. "I'm sure he is. I'll be home soon. We can all go out for some ice cream after practice. How does that sound?" "It sounds perfect," Adam replied, his voice light. "See you soon." I set the phone down, my heart lighter than it had been in years. I was finally stepping into a future where I wasn't carrying the weight of my past, where I didn't have to play a role in anyone else's story. It was mine to write now. It was almost a month after Sarah's letter that I received another message, this time from Daniel. He had tried to reach me before, but I had avoided his calls. This time, however, the message was different. He wasn't looking for answers. He wasn't asking me to solve his problems or take sides. He was simply telling me that the investigation into the fraud at the family clinic had gone public. He'd filed for divorce, and the truth had come to light. They were under investigation for Medicare fraud, and the whole thing was falling apart. I wasn't shocked. I had already known it would happen eventually. It wasn't about me and my past anymore. It was about their actions, their lies catching up with them. It was no longer my responsibility to pick up the pieces, to try to make things right. My father's clinic, my family's legacy, it was all a house of cards. In the end, it collapsed. But I wasn't going to get involved. I had a life of my own now. My success was my statement. I didn't need to have exact revenge. Life would take care of the rest. Later that week, as I walked through the conference hall at the American Medical Technology Conference, I couldn't help but feel a sense of accomplishment. Our company was now an industry leader. Modova's systems had been implemented across multiple hospital networks, and the feedback was overwhelming. We were changing how patient monitoring was handled, reducing complications and saving lives. As I passed our booth, I saw a familiar face in the crowd, Grace, my sister. She was standing near the education pavilion, looking small among the crowd of medical professionals. Her hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, and she was listening to a speaker discuss medical coding certification. She held a Modova internship application in her hand, her knuckles tight around the paper. Our eyes met across the room. There were no gasps, no dramatic gestures, just a quiet, subtle recognition. She was there, trying to make her way, perhaps, or trying to reconcile the life she had built with the reality she had long hidden. I didn't approach her. I didn't have anything to say to her, but I offered a small nod. Not forgiveness, not reconciliation, just acknowledgement. She returned the gesture, her eyes bright with something I couldn't place. It wasn't regret. It wasn't sorrow. It was something else, maybe determination. Maybe she was ready to rebuild her life too. Maybe she wasn't. As I walked away, I couldn't help but feel a quiet sense of closure. Some relationships don't need to continue. Sometimes you can only recognize the ending and let things be. It was time to move on. And I had. Back home, as the sun set and the soft golden light streamed through our living room window, I looked at my family, Adam, Jake, and the life we had built together. There was no bitterness in me anymore, no anger, just peace. I had closed the door on my past, and I was walking into the future with my head held high. Some things are worth letting go of, not because they were wrong, but because they no longer serve you. I stood up from my desk and grabbed my coat, ready to join Adam and Jake for the evening. Life was waiting for me, and it was beautiful. The lesson I learned from all of this was simple yet profound. The power to define my life was always in my hands. For so long, I let my past shape who I thought I was, believing I needed approval, recognition, and forgiveness from people who never saw me for who I truly was. But in letting go of that, I found my strength. I realized that success wasn't about proving anything to others. It was about being at peace with myself. I had built my own life, and it was mine to shape, free from the chains of the past.